Have you ever watched an episode of, say, like, Doom Patrol and thought to yourself, wow, a lot of this is coming off as really forced or really aggressive? Because if so, I may have a recommendation for you. Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is The Raptor, and today we're gonna do something that's a little bit different. Today we're gonna be talking about one of the most popular shows on Netflix right now, The Umbrella Academy. And hearing me say this, you're probably thinking one of three things. Either one, what the hell is that? Two, oh yeah, I think I've heard of that before. Or three, dude, you are late to the party. And yes, I know I'm late to the party. The first season of the show came out in 2019, but you know what? I just finished the first season of the show, and I want to talk about it. Plus, the second season of the show is coming out in literally a few days, and I am super excited for it. Also, if any of you leave spoilers in the comments for season 2 without giving some sort of spoiler warning, I will murder you. For those of you that don't know, The Umbrella Academy was originally a graphic novel, which was produced by Dark Horse. I actually bought the comic book because of the show, which is really cool. There are 10 episodes in season 1. They're all on Netflix right now, so you could literally binge all of season 1 if you want to, and the second season, like I said, is coming to Netflix very, very soon. And I want to make this video for all audiences, for people who have seen the show and for people who haven't seen the show. If you haven't seen the show, you can kind of treat this as like an introduction to the series, or a recommendation video, if you will. If you have seen the show, you can kind of treat this as like a season 1 spoiler-free review. I am going to get into some of the more basic details, like the characters and the plot and everything like that, but if you're interested in hearing what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it, and just my overall review of season 1, keep watching because I'll be sure to get into that stuff as well. So if you haven't seen the show before, you're looking for something to watch, and you don't want to know anything about the show, that's my recommendation. I recommend The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. If you want some more information on it, kind of like to ease your way into it because you think you might be interested, keep watching the video because I am going to be talking about the details on the show, and again later my opinions on the show, or my opinions of the show. I'm not going to spoil too much. I'm really only going to spoil some things in the first episode because of course you can't talk about details without talking about the first episode to some degree, but other than that, it's mostly going to be spoiler free. I personally think it's better when you don't know anything going into the show, but again, if you want some more information, keep watching the video, and again, for people who have seen the show before, keep watching until like the second half of the video because it is going to act as a season 1 review of sorts. So yeah, that's all the introduction we need. Let's get into it. So here's the basic plot of the show. Basically, a ton of children were born into the world magically on a day in 1989, and each of them have a special power. It's basically like a baby boom for mutants, except instead of a generation, it's like 43 of them. After this event occurs, a very rich and eccentric man named Sir Reginald Hargreeves is intrigued by all of this, and he tries to find as many of the babies as he can. And while he doesn't find too many, he only finds 7 of them, he adopts those 7 and actually raises them as superheroes in a child superhero team known as the Umbrella Academy. These children basically spent their entire childhoods just playing superhero and being isolated from the rest of the world. Really, they didn't have real childhoods, and their only friends were really just each other, you know, their brothers and sisters. Eventually, they do start to leave the academy one by one as they grow up, and they live their own lives, mostly non-superhero related. However, after it's revealed that Mr. Hargreeves has died, all of the children, who are actually now all adults, come back to the mansion, their original home, one last time to mourn him. And as a result, some words are said about how he was a very terrible and neglectful father, because yeah, he really was a shit dad. And naturally, this raises some tension between everyone. There's some fighting and arguing going on between them, and before they can all leave to go their separate ways once again, something happens at the mansion that basically signifies the end of the world. And that's all I'm going to say about the show. Again, I think it's better if you don't know too much going into it, but that is the basic plot of the show, at least when it comes to the first episode. So to go over the characters, we have Luther, aka Number 1, who is essentially the leader of the group and is also known as the Man on the Moon, because he spent a lot of time on the moon. We have Diego, aka Number 2, who's basically the Raphael of the group. He's like challenging leadership all the time. He has a lot of impulsive moments, but he also has some emotional and soft spots when it comes to other characters on the show. We have Alison, aka Number 3, who's a movie star and a model who has some serious family issues. We have Klaus, aka Number 4, who's a lovable and annoying idiot who's always high or drunk or both. We have 5, aka Number 5, who got lost in time for many years and witnessed the aftermath of the apocalypse. We have Ben, aka Number 6, who doesn't even really want to be there. He doesn't really want to use his powers at all. And lastly, we have Vanya, aka Number 7, who's a violinist. She's who you see on the cover of the book, and she has basically been neglected by her entire family for her whole life. I know I'm being vague about these characters. That's the fun part. Basically, each one of these guys possesses a superpower that they were born with. For example, one of them is superhumanly strong. Another one has mental manipulation in a certain fashion. Another one can speak to the dead. Hell, one of the major characters actually is dead, so only he can speak to him. And then you have Vanya, who hasn't shown any signs of possessing superpowers at all, so she wasn't really a part of the Umbrella Academy superhero team, despite still being a part of the family. They're all 30 years old when the show takes place in 2019, except for one of them who's 28 years older even though he looks 17 years younger. And that same character is being hunted down by two secret agent characters, and he's basically on the run from them for the whole time. And no, I will not spoil why. Some of the other major characters include the father, Mr. Hargreeves, who is dead, the mother, who stayed at the house even after all the children had left, and their butler Pogo, who also stayed at the house and is also a talking chimpanzee. Those are really all the characters I can get into right now without getting into spoiler territory, so that's really all that I have to say in terms of the details of the show. Now it's time to talk about the things that I actually really like in the show, and then after that we'll get into the stuff that I don't like as much. One thing I will say about the show is that there are some very obvious standout characters in the show, which means that there are some other characters that probably no one would consider their favorite character, which obviously isn't the greatest. However, while that may be the case, for me at least, it was really tough for me to pick my favorite episode out of all of them, and that's a really good sign. These are very long episodes. They're almost a full hour of actual content at least, as opposed to something that would be televised, which is more like 44 minutes not including commercials, when you talk about an hour-long program. And yeah, there's a lot going on in each episode. There are a lot of subplots going on for all the characters. If you somehow miss an episode and move on to the next one, you can't just figure out what's going on. You are going to be completely lost. Now, normally I would consider this a pretty bad thing, but this show, surprisingly for me, is close to perfect when it comes to fitting so much shit into an episode without overstuffing it. Each episode is full of entertainment from beginning to end. You're never really bored during the episode. It never really drags for you, at least for me it didn't. For me, the pacing is absolutely amazing in this show, and it really makes the episodes feel fulfilling rather than tedious. There are a lot of twists and secrets that are revealed gradually throughout the show, and I think this is also handled really well. A lot of the revelations are done in chunks, and they do a good job of enticing the audience and not revealing too much all at once. For me, this has found the perfect balance of making an audience invested without getting them mad because they're waiting too long to reveal something. There are also a lot of flashbacks that happen in the show, and again, normally this would actually really piss me off. It would get really annoying. But again, somehow it actually manages to work. All the flashbacks serve a purpose. They never feel like filler. They're either answering a question or they're provoking a new question, which again, it always makes it that you're asking questions, you're always invested, and again, it feels fulfilling. It feels like it's worth something. In general, I feel that this show has mastered revisiting things that we've seen before and adding new emotional context to it, because a lot of other media actually really fail at this. We go back to a scene that we've seen before, but there's really no reason to do it. But thankfully, this show doesn't do that at all. The character arcs are also really well done. Again, this is something where they really draw stuff out. They really make sure that you spend a lot of time on certain things, and that includes the character arcs. Some are more subtle than others, some are more gradual than others, but all of them make sense within the bigger narrative, and they're all very intriguing. Now, in this show, there is quite a bit of swearing and stuff that seems nonsensical, the stuff that you would kind of expect from like an edgy superhero show, but I feel like it handles it way better than something like Doom Patrol, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, because I feel like Doom Patrol is just way too aggressive in their approach. It seems like they really don't have any ideas, or they're just doing stuff just cuz, so they just have a character swear, or they do stuff that doesn't really make sense. But when it comes to Umbrella Academy, it really feels like everything that seems weird connects to the bigger picture. It's very intricately plotted. It really reminds me of something like Gravity Falls, where everything that happens really connects to the big picture very, very well. So for me, the best parts of this show are the storytelling, the pacing, and the mystery or shock elements. For me, it does that stuff really, really well. But even then, I still have more things that I really like about this show. For example, the music and the songs in this show are amazing. Even when they don't feel like they would be thematically appropriate, it still feels awesome and you get really invested, more invested than you were before. And the cinematography is also really engaging. All the production elements in general really come together to make it a real immersive experience. The jokes in the show are kind of hit or miss. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're not, but you're never really laughing at the show, which is something that, again, some superhero shows that are more edgy really fail at. Sometimes you're laughing at the show just as much as you're laughing with the show, but you can tell that the actors are having fun while also taking it seriously, so even when jokes don't really land that well, you don't really mind so much. And when it comes to the acting isn't amazing by any stretch. I'd say it's good, but I wouldn't say it's amazing or anything like that. But again, you can tell that the actors are taking their job very seriously, and you can tell that they put a lot of thought into making each of their own characters distinct. There's one actor who's like the youngest in the cast. He was originally on a Nickelodeon show that I never watched, but he's actually really good in this show, like surprisingly good. And even though there are some characters that are less interesting, as I mentioned before, I feel like the acting really makes up for it. You really feel for each of these characters, and they feel very distinct from one another. And one thing I want to say without getting too far into spoilers, there's this one thing that this show does in episode 6, which if I saw this happen on like any other show, it would be infuriating to me. It has this one trope that a lot of movies and TV shows do that I just really, really hate. And yet this show did it, and it's still somehow satisfying. The level of storytelling and pacing that this show comes with is just incredible to me. There is so much that this show does that I feel really shouldn't work, and yet it somehow still works. So overall, those are the things I like. Just to recap, I really like the storytelling, the pacing, the mystery elements, the production elements, and the acting. However, there are some things about this show that I don't like as much, and I really have to be fair if I'm doing a real review, so let's go over the things that I don't like. First off, I want to say that this show has some things that are very on the nose, like a little too on the nose, mostly when it comes to the exposition. Despite how much this show does right, the exposition is very painful to listen to sometimes. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it really is, but there are a lot of times where it just feels like fabricated dialogue that they made to tell the audience something that naturally would never be said otherwise, so it just feels very unnatural. You know, my general rule is to show and don't tell whenever you can, and this show doesn't really follow that very well at all. And also, I think that in general, the dialogue is just the worst thing about this show. The storytelling writing I think is very good, but the actual dialogue writing could be a lot better. And even though I said that this show probably does better than a lot of the other edgy superhero shows, the dialogue can sometimes suffer from the edgy superhero syndrome. The flashbacks can also really work like this. Sometimes you'll have a character that says something in the present, but then the scene before was literally a flashback of the same character or a different character saying the exact same sentence. You know, you don't need both, you know what I mean? Like, that's just way too on the nose. It's always better to just show than to show and then tell, you know? And the dialogue can sometimes make the acting seem worse. I genuinely feel that if this show had better dialogue writing, I would like the acting a little more than I do. And while the pacing of the show as a whole is very good, like it does a good job of cramming a lot into an episode and changing focal points very quickly, there are some things that do feel a little rushed, even when you have episodes that are this long. For example, you have one moment in season 1, episode 3, where you can tell that it's a very emotional moment between two characters, but you really don't feel like you've seen enough of these characters or enough of the relationship to really feel what you're supposed to be feeling. Like, if that happened in a later episode and you got the characters more fleshed out, it would have been a lot better. So, you know, sometimes things feel a little rushed, you know, at the very beginning of the show. Also, one thing I'd like to point out is that even though this show takes place in the present day, there are literally no cell phones in the show. Like, anytime anyone makes a call, it's either through a landline or a payphone or something like that, and when you notice this, it really bugs you just because you realize that there are no cell phones for the sole purpose of making the tension easier to make. There are some conflicts where if the characters had cell phones, it could have dealt with just like that, just because it was a misunderstanding between characters or a miscommunication or something like that. So it doesn't ruin the whole show in general, but, you know, it is a little weird just to see that there are no cell phones, and when you realize why, it's like, oh, well, okay. There are some other things in the show that annoy me a little bit, very specific things that I can't really talk about in this video because it goes too far into spoilers, but none of the problems that I have with this show really ruin the experience for me. At most, things might get a little annoying, but that's really the full extent of it. So where do I stand with the Umbrella Academy? Well, even though the show definitely isn't perfect, ultimately the things that I really like about the show take the show very far for me, and I've enjoyed it a ton. I would recommend it to anyone who really likes darker or more mature superhero stories, and if you can handle some edginess at times, then yeah, I'd recommend it. I'd watch at least the first few episodes of the show just to see if you can get a feel for it, to see whether or not you like it. I personally think it gets better as it goes on, but you know, just give it a try. Even if you just seem remotely interested by this review and by this overview and everything like that, I'd say give it a try. You might end up enjoying it, and if you do like the style, then I do think you will get invested in the show very, very quickly. Again, that's my recommendation, The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. I say go check it out. But if you have seen the show, tell me what you think of it. Tell me what you think of season 1. What did you like? What did you not like? Do you agree with my review, or do you think it's completely ass backwards? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd really like to hear what you guys have to say. And again, I'm really excited for season 2, but please do not spoil it. I'm probably not going to watch it all at once, so do not spoil anything from season 2 unless you give some sort of spoiler warning, but even then I prefer if you didn't. Just please, let's be respectful for each other. Be respectful to me. Please do not spoil anything. I'm just super excited for the season. If you enjoyed this video, please give this video a huge like. I always appreciate the likes. Leave in the comments down below anything you want to say, except spoilers. videos. If you could subscribe to this channel as well, that'd be so great. That would really help my channel out. If you want to see more videos like this, or if you want to see a video of me reviewing season 2 or anything like that, let me know down in the comments below. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. And yeah, no matter what you guys do, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And that's it for me. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.